Byron's Don Juan. Of course, the title of the thing is really Don Juan, not Byron's Don Juan, but it is written by Lord Byron, so he gets his name on it. Right off the bat, let's talk about the name Don Juan, because anyone who knows anything knows that it's not Don Juan, it's Don Juan, or Don Juan. But that's true everywhere in the world except for right here, when we're talking about this particular poem by this particular writer. Because back when, this is my take, back when Byron was writing, they anglicized names, just like we anglicize names today. We don't say Pedro or whatever, we say Pedro. If we meet someone named Pedro, we say, we might say, oh, look, you know what I'm talking about. There are a million names out there that are foreign sounding to us, and we anglicize them when we speak English. So we might now I'm still doing it. We don't say Pierre, we say Pierre, that kind of a thing. And so now the name Juan or Juan is so ingrained in English, and so we're so comfortable with that name that we just call it Juan. Although I do know a guy from New Zealand who called it Juan, and maybe that's how they pronounce it. Maybe that's how they anglicize it there, Juan. We still anglicize it because more people than not would say Juan instead of like a Juan, and I don't even know if I'm saying it right. Okay, all this to say that back in Byron's day, it was Juan. And how do we know this? Because this poem rhymes. And he rhymes, well, let's have a look. Okay. The print is incredibly small. I want a hero, an uncommon want. Let's see, and then we go. When every year and month sends forth a new one, till after cloying the gazettes with, sorry, I can barely see it, can't. The age discovers he is not the true one. Of such of these I should not care to vaunt. I'll therefore take our ancient friend Don Juan. It rhymes with new one, true one, and Juan. And of course, that's not the only time through the poem that he rhymes Juan. So we know it's Juan. And although he's talking about a Spanish guy, and we know that in Spain that guy would definitely not be called Juan, this is an English poem, and so I'm going to call him Don Juan whenever I talk about Byron's epic poem. And I'll probably have this conversation a million times with people about why I'm saying Juan instead of Juan. And the reason I'm going to have it a million times is because I love this poem. So I just think it's so good. And, I not exactly avoided, but I didn't really care much about Byron's poetry. I read one or two things that I really did like, but I didn't even remember that it was Byron. There's one about the biblical story about the battle never even got fought because the God's angel went and killed all the other people before the battle was fought. And that was a really cool poem. I didn't even remember that it was Byron until recently. But I came upon a little snippet of Don Juan, and it was so good. So then I got the whole thing. So let's look at this book as an object first, and then I'm going to tell you something about the poem because I love it. Okay, so this one, I bought it used. It's in decent condition. I mean, all the pages are there. They're not in any real danger of falling out or anything. I think it's maybe 80 years old or something along those lines. And this one was presented to Delma in 1934. Now, I said 80 years old, so at the very least, it's 90 years old, right? 1934. And that's if whoever gave it to Delma bought it new. So about 90 years old at least. There are no other dates on here to help me. As you can see, it's a tiny book. Just a little guy. And the print is, as I showed you before, equally tiny. Okay, so this is an epic poem, a mock epic poem. And that's what I didn't understand coming to Byron as someone who thought of him only as a sort of brooding, romantic poem, the sort of, I don't know, brooding, that's the word. That's the word I'm going to go with. And then it turns out that this entire thing is just a joke, and every line, almost every line, is a joke and has a joke in it and is funny. Whether the rhyme itself is sort of like, makes you groan like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you rhymed those two things. Or he's saying something funny, or he's taking down. This is like, it's got a diss track in it, or a few diss tracks. I mean, he takes down other poets. He's like, oh, this poet is, and famous poets you've heard of before, and they're like, this, oh, the trees and everything are so, I don't know, wonderful. Unless you're reading this poet who's completely incomprehensible, that kind of thing. He really goes for them, and it's pretty funny. So this is told by a narrator who, knows the family, knows Don Juan. And by the way, Don Juan in this book is not out there womanizing and finding innocent women and spoiling their virtue, and then in fact, I think in the original Don Juan, he killed the father or the husband of someone. That's not this guy. This is like a young man, and all the women love him, and all the women are after him, and they really kind of like from the age of 15 or 16. He's the age of 15 or 16. They're sort of coming after him. And so it's a completely different thing, turns it on its head. But it has such lines. Now, of course, I can't remember the lines exactly. So I'm going to tell you one or two lines that I kind of remember more or less, and you'll get the gist. Oh, look, these are stuck together. Oh, no. Oh, there we go. That's fine. So one was, she says something like, she snatches the food away, and she says, "Not another morsel. You've had enough to make a horse ill." And to me, that is just hilariously bad to rhyme "not another morsel," because you had enough to make a horse ill. That just makes me, I just love that. And the other one is that I have in my head all the time. But again, I don't have the exact wording in my head, but I have the idea. So Don Juan is wandering around, and he's sort of like love struck. So he's looking at the moon, and he's looking at the stars, and he's wondering how the moon got to be so, where it is, and what's the girth of the moon, and how did the stars get in place, and all these sort of philosophical, we would call them scientific, but back then they called them philosophical questions. And so the narrator says, now, when you think to yourself, why is he thinking all these things? You might think it was philosophy that this did, but I suspect that puberty assisted. Something like that, or maybe I can't help think that puberty assisted, or something like that. In any case, it sounds so modern to me. It sounds like such a modern poem to sit there and say that puberty assisted in his thinking about the moon and the stars and all that. And a lot of this is like that. There are so many lines in it that they did actually shock the people who read them at the time, but they shock me today because I think, could he get away with that? Was that something you could say in the 1800s? Well, he did say it, and it was shocking, and some people dismissed the book as, pornographic or horrible, or, just to, I don't know, whatever. But other people just loved it, and it really cemented his fame. He was already very famous, but this sort of cemented it. Okay, so look, that's Byron's Don Juan. What I could say to you is that if you've never thought about, never been interested in like romantic poetry or poets, give this a try. I'm not saying go out and buy the whole epic and read it, but like find little snippets of it, because it's really pretty funny. And especially once you get in the rhythm of it, the rhyming scheme and sort of the way that people talk in those days. or write in those days. There is a little bit of an adjustment there, but yeah, really good stuff. And that's Byron's Don Juan by Lord Byron.